Well, it's always such a joy to be here in Wood Forest. I love it. I'm just going to open up my Bible, so I'm ready for my thing here. But just such a joy to get to be here with you all. I'm so glad that I'm here. I'm so glad that you're here, and for the kids in the room, I'm so glad that you're here too, wherever you are. Thank you for being here. Such a joy to get to worship in the house of the Lord this morning. If we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Cabe. I'm the pastor of campus discipleship at the Woodlands Methodist Church. The most important thing that means for our purposes here today is that I'm your discipleship pastor. I have the great joy and pleasure of getting to work with Pastor Brent, my brother, and the other team that we have on staff are amazing people who serve in different leadership capacities here, and just such a joy to get to be part of this worshiping community. Would you pray with me? Gracious and merciful God, pour out your Holy Spirit on all of us who are gathered here, God, as we open up your scriptures. God, open us up so that we might hear the word that you have for us this morning in this place. In the name of your Son, Jesus, and in the power of your Spirit, I pray. Amen. So, we've been in Acts here in Wood Forest for the past little while. Many months ago, we were in Acts, and then we took a little hiatus for a number of months, and now we're back. And so today we're going to be in Acts chapter 20. Acts chapter 20. If you've got a Bible with you, you can turn and meet me there in Acts chapter 20. If you've got a Bible app on your phone, that's allowed too. But so. For starters, I wanted to set some context before we got into chapter 20, where we've been, what we've been up to. At this stage in the book of Acts, most of the other things have kind of fallen away in terms of the story, and what we're doing is we're just following along with the Apostle Paul and all of his travels. He's going all around the world. He's moving here and there and everywhere, and we're just going with him and the people he's with, and we're just looking over his shoulder as he ministers. And so that's where we're at in the book of Acts. Last week, my brother brought a great sermon from Acts 19. We were in Ephesus with Paul, and there were a bunch of crazy, wild, wacky things that happened in Ephesus in chapter 19. Paul was there for 2 years and change, and some crazy stuff happened, but this week in chapter 20, he leaves Ephesus. Ephesus, this kind of major city on the western coast of modern-day Turkey. The ancients called it Asia Minor. He leaves Ephesus, and what chapter 20 does is it just tells you where Paul goes for a little bit. It tells you that he leaves Ephesus and he goes north over the Aegean Sea into Macedonia, down into Greece, where he stays for 3 months. Then he goes back into Macedonia. He stops at a little city called Troas for just a week, just 7 days. And then he goes and says goodbye to the leaders in Ephesus before heading back to Jerusalem. Now, basically all of chapter 20 is just telling the story of Paul moving around and then him saying goodbye to the Ephesian leaders. And as I wrestled with those parts of the chapter, none of that really reached out and grabbed me. You know, there's something about a travel log that just doesn't, maybe I just don't have eyes to see, Brent, you know? Maybe I just don't have, but the Spirit just wasn't humming in that stuff for me as I thought about this week. And there's some really good stuff in Paul saying goodbye to the Ephesian leaders, but my goodness, we spent all of last week in Ephesus, and maybe we're just sick of Ephesus. Let's move on, right? So I wanted to focus, instead of all that stuff, I wanted to focus on 6 little verses. Instead of all the months that he spent in Greece and all the whatever, I want to focus on one night in Troas, that little town a little to the north of Ephesus that he visits for just a week before he says goodbye to the leaders in Ephesus and goes back home to Jerusalem. One night in Troas. As I wrestle with this really just leapt out to me, and it just grabbed me. Because I think there are 3 things for us here. I think there's 3 lessons for us here. In keeping with the idea that the Acts of the Apostles is maybe better titled, as Brent mentioned last week, the Acts of the Apostles is better titled maybe the Acts of the Spirit. I'm seeing 3 lessons for how to live life in the Spirit today in the 21st century. 3 lessons for how to follow the Spirit in our lives today. They just kind of reach out from me in this passage. One night in Troas. And these may not be the three most important lessons, to be honest, but these are the three lessons that are here. I was reminded in a conversation that our worship team was happening back in the room before worship started, just how important humility is for life in the Spirit and for life as worshipers. But that doesn't appear here to me. But there are three, I think, important lessons for us to take from this year for life in the Spirit. So it goes like this. On the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. And the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. So I want to set the stage here. It's the first day of the week. That means in their world, it's Sunday. It's Sunday. On the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. Now, most early Christians were Jewish. They were culturally Jewish. They were religiously Jewish. They were used to gathering for worship on a Saturday, on the Sabbath. They were used to this idea that God made the world in 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh day, and so we gather together, and we rest on the seventh day, and we gather together and worship God on the seventh day. They're used to that rhythm, but quickly, the Christians kind of gravitated toward worshiping on Sunday, on the first day of the week, instead of the seventh day of the week. This had the practical benefit of differentiating themselves from their Jewish brothers and sisters, kind of their mainstream Jewish brothers and sisters. But it also had some important meaning attached to it. Sunday is the day that Jesus rose from the dead. Sunday is the day of new life. It's the Easter that we experience every week. It's also, instead of meeting on the last day of the week, the culmination of the week, they met on the beginning of the week. It was as if they were saying, we're worshiping not in celebration of the old creation, but in celebration and remembrance and in looking forward to a new creation. So they gathered on the first day of the week on a Sunday. The downside of this, though, was that Sunday was a work day. Sunday was a work day. So they would have to either get up really early in the morning, or they would have to meet after worship. Either way, they're gonna be kind of tired. And so they're getting together on a work day, on a Sunday. And some churches would do this in the morning, early in the morning, but in Troas, and most churches quickly gravitated toward doing this in general in the late afternoon, evening, early night time kind of framework. So they were tired, and they would get together. And they wouldn't get together in a building that was owned by the church. Because for one thing, they didn't have enough money to afford a building, right? They were these small fledgling communities, mostly working class, poor folks, slaves among them, if they could get their master's blessing to come to worship. That was the makeup of the early Christian communities in most places. And so they would meet in people's homes, and the people's homes they would meet in were not large villas. They were urban, like, apartments. In these bigger cities, they were 8 to 10 stories tall, these big kind of tenement style, lots and lots of families packed in tight like sardines into these apartment buildings. And that's where they would meet, in these really small, intimate quarters. This group in Troas is probably just a few dozen people meeting in somebody's apartment. Or if he was able to get the blessing of his neighbors and they were too big for his apartment, maybe they're meeting out in the hallway. But they're just kind of crammed in there on a Sunday night in somebody's house, and they're meeting around food. They're meeting to break bread. This is their worship service. But honestly, the way that it was formatted was more informal. It was more casual than most of our worship services. The most casual worship service in our country is probably still more formal than the most formal worship service back then. It was laid back, it was loose, it was in somebody's home, it was in somebody's living room. It was just believers, brothers and sisters, gathered together to encourage one another, to read scripture over one another, to hear a word from the Lord from one another, maybe to sing, to do these kinds of things. And so this is the feel in the room as they gather. Honestly, it would have felt a lot more like one of our home groups than it would have felt like our worship service, right? It's a dozen or 2 dozen people gathered in somebody's home on the evening in a work day. They're gonna break some bread, and they're just going to share words of encouragement and hope with one another. So this is the atmosphere. This is a special day, though. The Apostle Paul is there. And so on the first day of the week, we came together in Troas, in this little city north of Ephesus. We came together to break bread. It says Paul spoke to the people, And because he intended to leave the next day, he kept on talking until midnight. Until midnight, y'all. So these folks they're used to getting together for an hour or two, maybe 3. They're not used to getting together for 5 hours, 7 hours, 12 hours, as it seems like this gathering must have went. They went a long time. This raises a difficult question because they don't have electricity. They don't have a light switch over by the door that they can just flip and suddenly there's light in the apartment. So how were they able to have a few dozen people kind of nice and cozy in this small quarters? And they're probably sitting on couches and beds. You know, this is the arrangement that they're in. How are they able to do this and stay awake for 5 hours, 7 hours? As you read on later, they stay until the sun comes up. So 12 or more hours. That's how were they able to pull this off? This is a big problem in the ancient world where you just don't have much light. And then most families only have a few lamps, but their lamps aren't like 60 watt, 100 watt lamps. They are like basically glorified candles. So how are they able to stay awake all night for an all-nighter with Paul, just hearing his encouraging words, experiencing the Spirit flowing through him? This raises a problem that is answered by the next sentence. I'm in Acts 20, verse 8 here. It says, there were many lamps in the upstairs room where we were meeting. There were many lamps in the upstairs room where we were meeting. So this is my first lesson that I have for us here this morning. For following the Spirit, for life in the Spirit in the 21st century, my first piece of advice for you is this: have many lamps. Have many lamps. Now, I don't mean go out to your car after worship and run over to Target and drop a few Benjamins on some lamps. What I mean is these people had planned, right? They were ready for whatever the Spirit might do. However the Spirit might move when Paul showed up, however the Spirit might move in their midst, and they made sure that instead of a normal household might have had 2 or 3 little candles, basically, everybody brought their lamps. Everybody brought their little candle-like lamps, so they would have had as much light as they possibly could, so they could all have a fighting chance to stay up. They arranged their lives. They arranged their time together. They arranged their space so that they could be open to the surprise of the Spirit moving. Maybe when they started, they just assumed, okay, we're probably just gonna be here for an hour or 2 like normal. But what if something happens? What if the Spirit moves? We better make sure we're ready. And so that's what they did. They made sure they were ready. So this is the first thing, right? Have many lamps. In other words, be open to the surprise of the Spirit in your life. Y'all, we've got our routines. We've got our rhythms. You wake up, you make your coffee, you sit down with your newspaper or your email, God forbid, or whatever it is that you're doing for your quiet time, better, right? Whatever you're doing for your morning, we got our routines around work. We got our routines around home life. We've got chores that we do when the kids go down. And we've got things that we do, and there's an order to these things, right? This makes sense to us. We've got to be open to being surprised. We've got to be open to disruption. We've got to be open to that 1 or 2 hour meeting, maybe lasting 12 sometimes, if we're gonna be open to the Spirit. This isn't a threat, by the way, for our current worship service. We're not taking this 12 hours. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. I might be tempted to make a joke about the sermon being like 10 more hours, but we're not gonna, that's not happening. So I don't have 10 hours worth of stuff to say this week is the truth, I wish I did. But so that's the first thing. Have many lamps. In other words, be open to the surprise of the Spirit in your life. But something happens. So we read on. We're going to be open to surprise of the Spirit. Verse 9. Seated in a window was a young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. When he was sound asleep, he fell to the ground from the 3rd story and was picked up dead. Some of y'all weren't expecting that. This story has taken a strange turn, hasn't it? Where are we going with this? Don't worry. So the first thing was have many lamps. In other words, be open to the surprise of the Spirit as you try to follow him in your life from the day to day. The second takeaway here is this: stay awake. stay awake. Stay awake, right? Just when you're in a position to receive from the Spirit, and that might be all the time, y'all. Stay awake. In other words, stay attentive. Pay attention to what the Spirit might be doing right around you. Pay attention. Attention is really important, y'all. So there's this psychological experiment that took place a few decades ago that my wife, who has a PhD in psychology, I probably should have run this by her before. She's got big eyes like, what is he gonna say next? He's gonna probably say something wrong. But a few decades ago, they did this experiment, and they showed several hundred people this video, and this video had like people in white shirts and people in black shirts, and they were passing a ball, and the participants in this, some of y'all might, this is kind of a famous experiment. Some of y'all might be familiar with this. But they were told, the people who were watching the video were told to count how many times the people in the white shirts touched the ball, or how many times the people in the black shirts did a bounce pass versus a chest pass, or something like this. So they're watching really carefully for the movement of this ball among all these people, the white shirts, and the people are moving around in the circle. And then after they watched the video, it was a short video, a minute or two, they watched really intently, really carefully. After they asked them a bunch of questions, like, how many times, how many bounce passes, how many times, whatever. They asked them all these questions, and then they asked, did you notice the guy in the gorilla suit that walked right through the frame, right in the middle of the video, and just stood in the middle for a few seconds and then walked out of the frame? And only half the people saw the guy in the gorilla suit. So they called this the invisible gorilla experiment, is what this kind of is called, the invisible gorilla, because only half the people, and he's just right there in the middle of these people who are walking in a circle around him, passing this ball, and only half of the people saw. What you pay attention to matters. Where your attention is makes a big difference. So what are you paying attention to in your life? What are you paying attention to as you sit with other people, as you just are around other people? Pay attention to. Notice where the Spirit might be moving. Notice people's facial expressions. Notice the things that they're saying. Maybe they express some need in their life. Maybe they say something that implies some need in their life, or maybe they don't, but just something tugs at you. And you just happen to be attentive enough to notice it. And something tells you, I think I really need to bake a dozen cookies for my neighbor. Or, I really need, Susan really needs an encouraging word. I don't know why, I just sense that. Or, I'm going to say something nice to Pastor Brent this week, because I don't know why, but something's just telling me we all could use some encouragement sometimes, right? Whatever it is, you feel that nudge and you respond to it. What you pay attention to matters, because you could miss those things. It'd be the easiest thing in the world to miss those things. Or to say, I'm too busy to bake my neighbor a dozen cookies. Or, it might be awkward if I give that encouraging word to Susan, or whatever it is, right? Whatever it is. I want to suggest one bit of really practical, nuts and bolts, actionable advice for just paying attention to our surroundings. Are you ready? You're not gonna like it. I don't like it. It's this: put your phone down. Put your phone down. So many of us, we have these amazing, magical devices that we carry around in our pockets all the time, and they're these incredible tools, but so often we carry around them in our hands, and these devices live between us and other people. And if there's one thing that these devices are amazing at, and I don't think this is the reason why we bought them, but if there's one thing that these devices are amazing at, it's distracting us. It's sucking up your attention. That's how all those apps that you downloaded for free, they're making money because they own your attention. Okay, so put the phone down. So many of us, we have these devices, we have these phones between us and our families, between us and our wives, men, or our husbands, ladies, or kids between us and our parents, or between us and our neighbors, or our enemies, or our coworkers, or our classmates, or other people that we love, or that Jesus tells us that we're supposed to love. And so put the phone down. But whatever it is, pay attention. Just be careful where your attention is. Because where your attention is going to make a huge difference in your ability to hear that whisper of the Holy Spirit when it comes, because it will if you're paying attention and you're open to surprise. So, and we read on. What happened to this? Last we saw, this kid had fallen off a 3-story window, and he was on the street dead. So not good, but we're going to pick it up in verse 10. It says, Paul went down, threw himself on the young man, and put his arms around him. Don't be alarmed, he said. He's alive. Then he went upstairs again and broke bread and ate. After talking until daylight, he left. The people took the young man home alive and were greatly comforted. So we've got to be open to surprise, to follow the Spirit in our lives. We've got to be careful about where we put our attention to be able to follow the Spirit in our lives today. And third, if you want to follow the Spirit, in addition to being open and to paying attention, you got to watch for new life. We've got to watch for new life. Because friends, when the people of God come together in faith, the Spirit of God is there with us. Jesus says, I will be with you when 2 or more of you are gathered. And I haven't seen the usher count for worship this morning. I don't know how many people are here, but I'm pretty sure it's 2 or more. I think we got it. When the people of God gather, the Spirit of God is right here with us. And when the Spirit of God is here, when the Spirit of God moves, new life happens. Y'all, light comes to dark places. Sleeping people wake up, and dead things rise. Dead things rise. My friends, this is the God we serve. This is why we better be open to surprise, because if we're not, Eutychus is just stuck on the pavement there, right? We better be open we better be paying attention to what the Spirit might be doing, or we're gonna miss these opportunities to experience that new life. And I know some of y'all out there are thinking, Cabe, gosh, that sounds nice, but I've been a Christian for 10 months or 10 years or 100 years, and whatever it is, and I've been a Christian, I've been following Jesus, I've been trying to follow the Spirit, and I'm not seeing it. There's a lot of hopelessness out there. There's too much darkness. There's too much death. There's too many sleeping people out there. Okay, where can I find the space where I can see people waking up, where I can see healing coming into families, into relationships, into communities, into this broken and hurting nation, broken and hurting world that we live in? And with that, and maybe this seems a little simple, but I want to challenge you to lean into the church, to lean into community. Because that's where the Spirit of Jesus is everywhere, and it can work anywhere, in all kinds of different places. It goes where it will, Jesus says. But one place we know that it is when the people of God gather. So lean into the church, not just on Sunday mornings though. We're about to launch home groups. We're about to launch home groups here, and so I want to challenge you. I want to encourage you to consider if you might have space in your life to open up an evening or some other time frame in your week or every other week to engage with your brothers and sisters in real community. The way we do home groups here at the Woodlands Methodist Church, it's designed to help us be open to the Spirit and to the surprise of the Spirit in our relationships. They're designed to help us learn how to pay attention to the Spirit around us. And they are places where we're seeing new life happen in these little communities, in the Woodlands, and I know it's gonna happen here in Wood Forest here. So I want to encourage you to, whether it's a home group or whether it's some other Bible study, some other Christian community, you've got to find brothers and sisters in the faith that you can lean on, that can love you right where you're at and can encourage you and maybe sometimes challenge you to take those next steps. That's where the new life is. That's where the new life is. It's where Jesus is, which is anywhere, can be anywhere, but we know it's in community. So if you feel stagnant, if you feel stuck, lean into the church, lean into community, join a home group, Bible study, some other opportunity. But don't just let this moment pass. Like, really do it. twc.org/home groups. There you go. But bow your heads and pray with me. Gracious and merciful God, pour out your Spirit on us here at the church at Wood Forest, God. That as we gather, whether we're gathering with a few hundred of our brothers and sisters on a Sunday morning at 9:30 and 11, or whether we're gathering with a dozen or 20 or so of our brothers and sisters in someone's home to break bread and encourage one another and challenge one another, God, just pour out your Spirit on us. Help us to be a people who are open, always open to your surprise. God, help us to be a people who are paying attention, always attentive to the things that you might do in our midst. God, because you will. You will. Help us to be a people, God, who are watching for new life, because that is what you are, God. You are the God of new life. You bring light to dark places. You wake up sleeping people. And you bring dead things back to life again. God, do it again. Do it again in our lives. Do it again in our community. And do it again all throughout this broken and hurting world that we live in. In the name of your Son, Jesus, and in the power of your Spirit, I pray. Amen.